My name is Dr Michelle Dickinson. I've learned that breaking things down is the easiest way to understand them. So join me. We'll break down scientific concepts, meet some amazing scientists and inventors, and help you discover the world around you.
I'm Dr Michelle Dickinson, and today we're going to be talking about our brains. Some of you may know me as the character Nanogirl, and I have borrowed her lab today to go through some research and do a few experiments. Ever wondered how we breathe and blink without even having to think about it? How do we remember things like our address and where we live, or the names of our friends? By the end of this episode, you'll understand how your brain works, learn how we can trick our brains pretty easily, and understand how your entire body communicates at lightning speed just so you can get through your everyday tasks. We're also going to be doing a couple of experiments that will make you question whether or not what you think you see is actually true. You'll be surprised at just how simple this is to do. To join in, you won't need any special equipment, just a notebook and something to write down your observations. If you haven't got a notebook and pencil handy, go grab them. A bit later, I'll be checking in with one of my science helpers who'll be joining us from home and speaking to one of my friends, Dr Malvindar Singh-Bains, who'll be able to tell us even more amazing things about how our brains work. Okay, let's get started. Your brain basically controls everything that your body does, even when you're asleep. There are 5 main parts of the brain, and they each have a different job to do. First, there's the cerebrum, right at the front and on the top of your head. It's the biggest part of your brain, and you use it for your everyday thinking and movement. It's divided into 2 halves, or hemispheres. The right hemisphere controls the left-hand side of your body, and the left one controls the right. You need your cerebrum to do homework, to play a video game, or to draw a picture. And you also need it to dance or kick a rugby ball around. And depending on which hemisphere you favor determines which is your dominant side. Your memory is also stored here too. Then there's your cerebellum. This part is much smaller than the cerebrum, and it's located at the back of your brain. And it's responsible for organizing your muscles to work together to help you with balance and posture. The cerebrum and the cerebellum work together so that you can carry out different movements and actions without falling over, which is a good thing. Right at the base of your skull, where it meets the top of your neck, is your brain stem. This is the part of the brain that controls all of the things that happen without you thinking about them. Simple things like breathing, swallowing, and your heart rate. Your pituitary gland is right there behind your eye in the middle. It's only the size of a pea, but it has a massive job to do. It's responsible for you growing taller, as well as making hormones that control many things in our bodies. And this is how we mature. Your hypothalamus is your body's thermostat. It monitors temperature and tells your body when to make adjustments. For example, if you get too hot or too cold. Okay, so that's a summary of a few parts of our brain. But how does that connect to everything else? Well, our brains are part of our nervous system, which is responsible for carrying messages backwards and forwards between your brain and the rest of your body. The cells of the body that pick up the signals and send them to your brain are called neurons. You may know them as nerve cells. Let's take a look here at my pipe cleaner neuron. Here we can see some of the important features. In the center, we have the nucleus, and it's surrounded by the soma. Then coming out, we have the dendrites, where the neuron tends to receive its signals. Then we have the tail, which is called the axon. At the end of the axon, you have the terminal. When you touch something hot, there's usually a delay before you move your hand away from the heat source. This is because the signal needs to travel all the way from your skin up your nerves, connect to your spine, and then shoot this information up to your brain. Once here, your brain then sends a signal all the way back down saying, quick, take your hand off. And then you make that action. It's amazing when you think about how fast those messages are going backwards and forwards. However, the fact that these signals still take time to travel is why you don't always take your hand off something hot straight away. Now, if we do the same thing again and again, our brain remembers it and we don't have to think about it. It becomes automatic for us. However, for new things, we sometimes need to train our brains. For example, think back to the first time that you learned to ride a bike. Your brain had to actively think about balancing and pedaling and steering and then watching where you were going and then braking. But the more times you did it, your neurons sent the same message again and again until a pathway was created. Now you can ride your bike without thinking about it, right? Because your brain now has a bike riding pathway. These remembered patterns are what we'll be experimenting with today. So let's check in with one of my helpers. Hey Amelie, thanks for helping me today. How are you?
Good, how are you, Michelle?
I am really good, thank you. In a second, we're going to do a science experiment, but before then, let's just talk about our brains. Do you have a brain?
I'm pretty sure I do.
And do you think it's a good thing to have?
Yeah.
Now, tell me about your brain. Have you trained your brain to do anything amazing?
Well, I was pretty bad at drawing when I first started, but now I'm actually quite good.
And what sort of things do you draw?
Like cartoon shows I watch, or just like doodles.
Okay, Amelie, are you ready to have your brain tested?
Yeah.
Right, what I'm going to ask you to do is read out the words in front of you as fast as you can.
Green, red, orange, red, purple, green.
Perfect. That was an easy test, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now I want you to do the same thing again. I want you to read out those same words, but instead of saying the words that you can read, I want you to read out the colors that you can see. So for the example, the first one says green, but it's written in red. So I want you to say red. Okay? As fast as you can, go.
Red, red, green, purple, blue, grey, yellow.
Whoa, so fast. Did you find that harder though?
Yeah.
Did you have to think twice before you said the word because your brain wanted to say what it was reading versus what it was seeing?
Yeah, with the word red, but the color green, it was quite hard.
And that's because our brains like to take shortcuts. And so what they try to do is jump to what we already know because we've trained them how to read words very quickly. And so your brain wanted to shortcut the time and actually just jump to the word that it knew. But actually what you were trying to do is the long thing, which is read the color out, which is much harder.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to give you another quiz to do. I'm going to show you 3 shapes. They're going to look a bit like arrows, and I want you to tell me which one you think is the longest line in the middle.
So in the middle arrow?
The middle arrow, so you think that's got the longest line in the middle?
Yeah.
What if I told you that all the lines are exactly the same length?
Oh.
Do they look the same?
Oh, now I see that they're the same.
But did your brain automatically think that the middle one was the longest?
Yeah.
Mine too. But the lines are exactly the same in the middle, even though our brain every time always thinks the middle one is longer. And so this is a special experiment that we show how our brain actually takes a shortcut to perceive depth. If you want to do this at home, all you need is some colored pens and a ruler. You can draw the lines and you can draw out the words in different colors. Very easy. And then you can test your friends. Amelie, do you think you'll do this at home and maybe test your brothers or sisters?
Probably.
And do you think they'll pass or fail?
Maybe fail.
I think we'll all fail because this is the way that our brains are wired. We tend to jump to conclusions because that's how we've trained them, just in the same way that you trained your brain to draw. Amelie, thank you so much for helping me today.
Thank you for teaching me.
As always, after every experiment, we need to write down our observations. These help us to understand our results and make interesting predictions for our next experiments. So, my observations today. What did we see? Well, I found that saying the actual color of the words rather than just reading them was more difficult. And I also thought that the lines were different lengths. Specifically, I thought the middle line was the longest. So now we need to think of the reason why we saw those results. And it's because my brain was reading a word, so it was harder for it to also think of a different word at the same time. I needed to slow down rather than trying to do the task quickly. The second experiment is actually called the Muller-Lyer test, and it's a really easy way to confuse your brain. What happens is our brain likes to make assumptions around depth and distance, and the way that we've learnt about lines and arrows has preset in our brains how we perceive things to be distantly apart and therefore with depth versus all the same on one line. And so it's classed as an optical illusion. Now we need to reflect. What would happen if we could change the experiment somehow? Would it give the same results if we tested it out on hundreds of people? Do you think they would all give us the same answer? And therefore, can we use what we know about how our brains use lines to help us draw 3D objects with straight lines? Like, let's say, a cube or a prism. I think I've given my brain enough of a workout for today. It's time to see what other people are working on in this field. Dr Malvindar Singh-Bains is a neuroscientist who works at the University of Auckland's Centre for Brain Research. Malvindar's often called a brain detective, and every day she spends in the lab takes us one step closer to understanding one of our most mysterious organs. Hi Malvindar, how are you?
Hi Michelle, nice to see you.
So good to see you again. Can you just, for everybody watching, introduce yourself, please?
Well, hi everyone. My name is Dr Malvindar Singh-Bains, and I'm a neuroscientist at the Centre for Brain Research at the University of Auckland, associated with Brain Research New Zealand.
So you're obviously a scientist. When did you first think that science was for you?
I think I've always had quite an inquisitive nature growing up. I love to get my hands dirty and do gross things like mix water with mud in the backyard and, look at dead bugs using a magnifying glass. And I always had kind of a inquisitive nature about people's bodies, like, why do we burp? Why do we sneeze? And I think science is one of the only fields where all we basically do is find out how things happen. Why do things happen? And what makes it interesting? And how can we help people using the knowledge that we have?
So how did you get into brain research?
I was sitting in my first year undergraduate classes, and this amazing lecturer came up and started speaking about the human brain and how complex it is, and yet how simply he explained it and so beautifully. And he's now my mentor. His name is Sir Richard Fall, and he's the director of the Centre for Brain Research, and he's part of the reason why I ended up becoming a brain researcher. So kids, if you've got a mentor out there, follow them.
Tell us about your research on brains.
My field of research focuses on finding out why certain brain cell types get lost in brain diseases like Alzheimer's or like Huntington's disease. And so patients that have Alzheimer's disease tend to go down this pathway of gradually losing their memories. Whereas in the case of Huntington's disease, that predominantly affects your movements.
So we've been learning a little bit about axons and neurons. And so is your research about looking at the whole brain or individual parts of the brain?
My research tends to rely quite heavily on these things behind me. So these things are microscopes. These teeny tiny neurons are impossible to see with the naked eye. So I use microscopes to better understand the different changes that occur to neurons in diseases.
So you're looking at them one by one, each neuron on its own?
Yeah, sometimes I'm looking at tens of thousands at a time, and other times I'm looking at what we call ultrastructure, so the real close-up features of an individual neuron that might give us indications that it's sick.
Now, I've heard that when people black out because they've got a knock on their head or something, that's to do with the brain. Is that true?
It is. Right at the back of our brain, we have an area called the occipital lobe. And that part of our brain is responsible for vision. Our eyes are at the front of our head, but the part responsible for being able to see is actually at the back. So if you're walking around and someone knocks you on the back of the head, the reason why you black out is because the part of your head that's just been hit is actually the part responsible for vision.
Can you tell me about a typical day in your lab?
My day is different every single day. I could be doing something like working with my brain in the laboratory. I could be at the microscope looking at my brain cells. I could be teaching students. I could be getting on a jet plane and flying to a random country to teach people.
Okay, so I don't think you're the only person in the world researching brains, and you're part of Brain Research New Zealand. So what are other people working on?
We've got researchers that are working with patients in a clinic to try and improve their ability to think better. And then you have other scientists that might be looking at animal models of different brain diseases. Then you have people that are trying to model brain diseases using computers. So everyone has their unique skill set, and that's important when we're trying to tackle really big problems here.
So if I'm at school now and I want to be a brain researcher, what do I have to do?
You're really looking at trying to drive your knowledge of biology, perhaps chemistry, perhaps physics, or some general sciences, just to get sort of a background understanding of how our bodies work.
What is the coolest thing about your job?
Being able to see a human brain. I remember the first time I saw a human brain, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up because I thought, I cannot believe that this single organ is responsible for this person's personality, their memories, their emotions, is all here. It's phenomenal.
Amazing. Okay, Malvindar, before we go, do you have one fun fact about brains that you would like everybody to know?
Did you know that the brain itself does not feel pain? So, if I was to pretend that I'm going to put you on a surgery table, Michelle, and I was to stick a little probe at your brain and prod around, you wouldn't feel anything.
Wow, I did not know that, and that's, I think, cool, but please don't poke my brain.
No, I'm not going to do that.
Hey, Malvindar, thank you so much for your time today. That was awesome. We'll catch you soon.
No worries, it's a pleasure.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about brains, but there's actually a whole other area that we haven't even explored yet. Your brain is also responsible for why we feel emotions, like happiness or excitement. Emotions allow us to react to situations. For example, fear will set your heart racing, while happiness could make you laugh. The key areas of your brain that deal with recognizing, controlling, and showing the body's reaction to these emotions is known as the limbic system. So the next time that you watch your favorite feel-good movie, think about how you are feeling. When you feel happy, it's probably due to your brain activating this limbic system and releasing a neurohormone called dopamine. Why don't you try writing a list of things that help to release dopamine in your day? Listening to your favorite music, seeing your friends, or just petting your dog. Even thinking about them when you're not doing them can release some of that feel-good hormone. Something similar also happens when we feel sad or scared. When we watch a scary movie, for example, the tension that we feel activates our fight or flight reflex, which is when our brain tells our bodies to release a hormone called adrenaline. This can be a life-saving reflex, as it's really good at getting us out of danger as fast as possible. It will make us feel jumpy. It's the same feeling that you get when you do something terrifying, like riding a roller coaster or jumping off something really high. When we get scared, adrenaline makes our hearts race, and more oxygen gets pumped into our muscles. Our brains are telling us that something scary is happening, so we need to get ready just in case we need to run away. While watching a scary movie can result in the same physical response, even though that we know it's not real, this is due to another trick of our brain left over from our ancestors, when danger from predators was a constant threat. Thinking about our brains and their unlimited potential really is so exciting. It's mind-blowing to think that just one organ is responsible for everything from whether we're left or right-handed to how our body responds to being happy or frightened. We still don't fully understand how our brains work, and there is still so much to learn, which, as we saw, is keeping the scientists busy. There's much more to discover. Just keep asking questions and testing your theories by experimenting. Teachers and parents, don't forget to visit nanogirlslab.com, where we have downloadable content to help you to continue on your brain science journey with your students. much does the brain weigh? How fast can messages travel to our brain? How much of our body's energy is used by our brain? Do certain foods